Have you ever noticed how the people who hurt you most are the ones you think about longest? How the relationships that ended badly are the ones that haunt your dreams? How you can forget 1,000 acts of kindness, but remember every detail of betrayal? But here's the truth that will shatter everything you believe about healing. The reason you can't let go isn't because you love too much, it's because you're afraid to love completely. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." But when it comes to lost love, most people confine themselves to the past. They become prisoners of their own attachment, chained to the memory of someone who has already moved on. They mistake their inability to release for proof of their capacity to love. But this is not love, it's possession. And the difference between the two will determine whether you heal or remain broken for the rest of your life. The ancient Stoics understood something about human suffering that modern psychology has only recently rediscovered. We suffer not from what happens to us, but from our resistance to what has happened. Every moment you spend clinging to someone who no longer wants to be held is a moment you choose suffering over freedom. But why do we cling? Why do intelligent, self-aware people voluntarily imprison themselves in the memory of relationships that have already died? The answer lies in a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of attachment and the psychology of loss. When you cannot let go of someone, you're not demonstrating the depth of your love, you're revealing the poverty of your self-worth. Because people who know their own value do not beg the universe to return what was never meant to stay. Let's examine what really happens when you can't let go. You've created what psychologists call a trauma bond, an emotional addiction to the neurochemical cocktail of hope and despair that keeps you cycling between fantasy and devastation. Your brain, desperate for the dopamine hit of reunion, manufactures elaborate scenarios where reconciliation becomes possible. You replay conversations, searching for hidden meanings. You analyze their social media posts like an archaeologist studying ancient texts. You maintain hope despite overwhelming evidence that the relationship is over. This is not romantic dedication. It's psychological self-harm disguised as loyalty. The cruel irony is that your inability to let go virtually guarantees that they will never return, because desperation repels everyone, including those who once loved you. Your clinging energy broadcasts weakness, neediness, and emotional instability, the exact opposite of what made you attractive in the first place. But here's what most people don't understand about letting go. It's not about forgetting them or pretending the relationship didn't matter. It's about transforming your relationship with the memory itself. It's about moving from ownership to gratitude, from possession to appreciation, from clinging to blessing. The ancient Buddhist concept of loving kindness provides a framework that Western psychology has only recently begun to understand. When you wish someone well, genuinely, completely, without expectation of return, you free yourself from the prison of resentment. But this practice requires tremendous courage, because it demands that you love without conditions, including the condition that they love you back. Most people resist this approach because they confuse love with attachment. They believe that if they stop suffering over someone, it means they didn't really care. But the opposite is true. Suffering over someone you cannot have is not love, it's ego. Real love wants what's best for the other person, even when what's best for them doesn't include you. Consider the difference between these two internal narratives. I love them so much I can't let go, versus I love them so much I want them to be happy, even without me. The first is possession masquerading as devotion. The second is love in its purest form. This understanding of authentic love requires what psychologists call emotional differentiation, the ability to maintain your sense of self while deeply caring for another. Most people lack this skill because they were never taught the difference between intimacy and enmeshment, between caring and codependency, between loving someone and losing yourself in them. Emotional differentiation means you can feel deeply without drowning. You can care profoundly without becoming consumed. You can love completely without disappearing into the other person's identity, needs, or problems. This capacity is what separates mature love from adolescent infatuation. When you lack emotional differentiation, every relationship becomes a threat to your autonomy. You either distance yourself to maintain independence, or lose yourself to maintain connection. But differentiated individuals can be both separate and together, independent and intimate, autonomous and attached. The person you cannot let go of likely triggered your undifferentiated emotional patterns. Perhaps you lost yourself in the relationship, making them the center of your universe. Perhaps you became addicted to their validation, their presence, their approval. Perhaps you started defining yourself through their eyes rather than your own. This is why letting go feels like dying, because in some sense the version of yourself that existed only in relation to them must die for you to be reborn as someone capable of healthy love. But here's what most people don't realize. The pain of losing someone often has less to do with losing them, and more to do with losing the version of yourself you became when you were with them. You're not just grieving the relationship, you're grieving an identity that was built on unstable ground. This explains why some breakups devastate us while others, even from longer relationships, leave us relatively unscathed. The devastating ones are those where we abandoned ourselves to maintain the connection. The manageable ones are those where we remained ourselves throughout the relationship. The question becomes, who were you before you met them? What parts of yourself did you sacrifice to keep them interested? What dreams did you shelve? What boundaries did you abandon? What aspects of your personality did you suppress? Recovery isn't just about getting over them, it's about getting back to yourself. The self that existed before you learned to contort into someone you thought they would love. The self that had opinions, preferences, goals, and values independent of their approval. This process of self-recovery is why some people emerge from heartbreak stronger than they entered the relationship. They use the pain as motivation to rebuild themselves from the ground up, but this time on a foundation of self-knowledge rather than other approval. The ancient Greek concept of eudaimonia, often translated as happiness but better understood as human flourishing, provides a framework for this reconstruction. Eudaimonia is not dependent on external circumstances or other people's choices. It comes from living according to your own values, developing your own potential, and contributing your unique gifts to the world. When your happiness depends on another person's presence, you're living in what philosophers call hedonic adaptation, constantly needing more external stimulation to maintain the same level of satisfaction. But eudaimonic well-being is internally generated and therefore sustainable regardless of relationship status. The person you cannot let go of became your drug. Like any addiction, tolerance developed over time. You needed more of their attention, affection, and validation to achieve the same emotional high. When they left, you experienced withdrawal, but instead of recognizing this as addiction recovery, you labeled it as evidence of true love. But true love doesn't create dependency. It creates freedom. It doesn't diminish you. It expands you. It doesn't make you smaller. It helps you become more yourself than you've ever been. If you found this perspective on letting go valuable, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more people discover these insights about transforming pain into power and attachment into authentic love. Consider how different your life would be if instead of teaching you to cling, relationships taught you to grow. Instead of making you dependent, they made you more independent. Instead of losing yourself in others, you found more of yourself through connection. This is the paradox of healthy relationships. The more secure you are in yourself, the more intimacy you can handle. The less you need someone, the more you can truly love them. The more complete you are alone, the more you can contribute to a partnership. This distinction matters because your internal narrative determines your emotional reality. When you cling to someone from a place of pain, you're essentially saying, "My happiness depends on controlling another person's choices." But when you release someone from a place of love, you're declaring, "My happiness comes from my capacity to love, regardless of whether that love is returned." The first position makes you a victim of circumstances beyond your control. The second makes you sovereign over your own emotional state. But let's address the real reason most people cannot let go. Fear. Fear that releasing them means accepting that the relationship is truly over. Fear that moving on dishonors what you shared. Fear that letting go means admitting you were wrong about their importance. Most terrifyingly, fear that if you stop suffering over them, no one will ever matter that much again. These fears are based on scarcity thinking, the belief that love is finite, that deep connections are rare, that losing this person means losing your chance at happiness. But abundance thinking recognizes that your capacity to love deeply is not diminished by loss, it's enlarged by it. Every person who enters your life teaches you something about love. Some teach you how to open your heart, others teach you how to protect it. Some show you what you want, others reveal what you cannot tolerate. The person you cannot let go of taught you that you're capable of profound attachment. But they also revealed your need to learn the difference between love and dependency. The practice of letting go begins with radical acceptance of what is. Not what you hoped would be, not what you think should be, what actually is. The relationship is over. They have chosen to leave. Your attempts to change this reality have failed. These are facts, not interpretations. Most people get stuck at this stage because they confuse acceptance with approval. You don't have to like what happened to accept that it happened. You don't have to agree with their choice to acknowledge that they made it. You don't have to think it's fair to recognize that it's final. Acceptance is not passive resignation, it's active acknowledgement of reality. And only from this foundation of truth can you begin the work of transformation. The next step involves what I call emotional archaeology, the process of excavating the beliefs, expectations, and attachments that keep you bound to someone who is no longer available. This requires honest examination of your motivations for clinging. Are you holding on because you genuinely believe the relationship should continue, or because your ego cannot accept rejection? Are you fighting for love or fighting against loss? Are you trying to win them back or simply trying to avoid the pain of moving forward? Most people discover that their attachment has less to do with the other person and more to do with their own unprocessed needs. The partner they cannot release often represents something they feel they lack within themselves: validation, security, worth, completion. When you cling to someone else to feel whole, you make them responsible for your psychological well-being. This is not love, it's emotional parasitism, and no healthy person wants to be someone else's source of self-worth. True healing begins when you reclaim responsibility for your own completeness, when you stop outsourcing your happiness to another person's choices, when you recognize that your worth was never dependent on their continued presence in your life. This shift from external validation to internal security is what allows genuine letting go to occur, because you cannot release what you believe you need to survive. The practice of loving-kindness meditation that Dr. Taraban mentions is powerful, precisely because it reverses the neurochemical patterns that keep you trapped. Instead of marinating in resentment, betrayal and abandonment, you consciously generate compassion, understanding, and goodwill. This isn't about being naive or pretending they didn't hurt you. It's about recognizing that carrying hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Every moment you spend in resentment is a moment you steal from your own healing. But loving-kindness practice goes deeper than emotional regulation. It's a form of spiritual alchemy that transforms the lead of suffering into the gold of wisdom. When you can genuinely wish someone well who has caused you pain, you demonstrate mastery over your own emotional state. You prove that your happiness is not hostage to another person's behavior. Start with small acts of mental generosity. When you think of them, instead of rehearsing grievances, practice saying, "May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you find peace." Initially, this will feel forced, even fake. Your ego will rebel against offering kindness to someone who doesn't deserve it, but deserving has nothing to do with it. This practice is not for them, it's for you. Every time you choose compassion over resentment, you strengthen your capacity for emotional freedom. Every moment you spend wishing them well is a moment you're not spending in self-imposed suffering. Over time, something remarkable happens. The emotional charge around their memory begins to dissipate. The stories you tell yourself about the relationship become less dramatic, less personal, less painful. You begin to see the entire experience with clarity rather than through the distorting lens of wounded attachment. This doesn't mean you forget them or minimize what you shared. It means you can remember without bleeding. You can acknowledge the good times without demanding they return. You can feel grateful for what was without being devastated by what isn't. But the deepest level of letting go requires confronting your own mortality. Every attachment is ultimately temporary. Every relationship will end through choice, circumstance, or death. The Buddha called this impermanence, and he identified our resistance to it as the root of all suffering. When you truly understand that nothing lasts forever, you stop trying to make temporary things permanent. You appreciate what you have while you have it, knowing that loss is inevitable. This perspective doesn't make love less meaningful. It makes every moment of connection precious. The person you cannot let go of was never yours to keep. They were a gift, temporary, beautiful, transformative, but never permanent. Your suffering comes from demanding permanence in a world defined by change. Once you accept impermanence as the fundamental nature of existence, letting go becomes not just possible but natural. Like autumn leaves releasing from the tree, you can let go not from weakness but from wisdom. Not from lack of love but from abundance of understanding. This is where the ancient wisdom tradition diverges from modern psychology. Psychology often focuses on healing trauma and restoring normal function. But wisdom traditions go further. They use suffering as a doorway to awakening. Your inability to let go is not just a personal problem to be solved. It's a spiritual invitation to grow beyond the small self that demands the world conform to its desires. It's an opportunity to discover that your capacity for love is not diminished by loss but refined by it. The person who hurt you became your teacher, though they never intended it. They taught you that happiness sourced from another person is inherently unstable. They showed you the difference between love and attachment. They revealed your own capacity for resilience. They forced you to discover strength you didn't know you possessed. From this perspective, even painful relationships become gifts, not because the pain was good, but because it revealed what needed healing within you. The person you cannot let go of exposed every wound that required attention, every belief that needed examination, every pattern that demanded transformation. But here's the paradox. The more completely you let go, the more likely they are to return. Not because letting go is a strategy for getting them back, but because people are attracted to those who don't need them. When you stop clinging, you become attractive again. When you stop chasing, you become worth pursuing. This is not a manipulation tactic. It's a recognition of human psychology. Desperation repels everyone. Neediness destroys attraction. Emotional independence creates magnetic pull. But by the time you've truly let go, their return becomes irrelevant. You've discovered that your happiness was never dependent on their presence. You've learned that love is not about holding on, but about allowing. You've realized that the person you really needed to find was yourself. The greatest irony of letting go is that it often leads to getting back something even better than what you lost. Not necessarily the same person, but the same capacity for love without the dysfunction of attachment. Not the same relationship, but a better relationship with yourself. When you can love without clinging, you become capable of healthy intimacy. When you can appreciate without possessing, you attract partners who value freedom as much as connection. When you can wish someone well who hurt you, you demonstrate emotional maturity that draws mature people into your life. The practice of letting go transforms you from someone who loves from neediness into someone who loves from fullness, from someone who clings from fear into someone who embraces from courage, from someone who suffers over what they cannot control into someone who finds peace in what they can. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. Letting go is not a single event but a daily practice. Every time you catch yourself rehearsing old grievances, you choose compassion instead. Every time you find yourself stalking their social media, you choose presence instead. Every time you feel the familiar pull of attachment, you choose freedom instead. Some days will be harder than others. Grief is not linear, and healing is not constant. There will be moments when the old pain resurfaces, when the temptation to reach out feels overwhelming, when letting go seems impossible. In these moments, remember that your suffering is optional. The pain of loss is inevitable. Relationships end, people leave, love sometimes dies. But the suffering you add to that pain through resistance, resentment, and attachment is entirely your choice. You can choose to honor what you shared without demanding it continue. You can choose to appreciate what you learned without regretting that it ended. You can choose to love what was without destroying what could be. The person you cannot let go of gave you the greatest gift possible, though they probably don't know it. They showed you that you are capable of profound love. They revealed that you can survive profound loss. They taught you that happiness must come from within rather than from without. Now it's time to take that gift and use it to create a life worthy of the love you're capable of giving. Not a life spent looking backward at what ended, but a life spent moving forward toward what's possible. Because the person who truly deserves your love is waiting for you to become the person capable of loving without conditions, appreciating without possessing, and letting go without regret. That person is your future self, and they're worth fighting for. The ancient Stoics had a practice called memento mori. Remember you will die. This wasn't morbid contemplation, but life-affirming wisdom. When you truly understand that your time here is limited, you stop wasting it on people who don't value it. Every day you spend imprisoned by attachment to someone who's no longer available is a day stolen from your actual life. Every hour spent rehearsing old conversations is an hour not spent creating new experiences. Every moment lost to resentment is a moment that could have been spent in gratitude. Your life is too precious to waste on someone who chose to leave it. Your love is too valuable to spend on someone who doesn't want it. Your energy is too sacred to drain in pursuit of someone who is running away. This is not about becoming cold or closed-hearted. It's about becoming wise enough to direct your love toward those who will treasure it, rather than waste it on those who have rejected it. The ultimate act of self-love is letting go of someone who doesn't love you back. The deepest form of respect for what you shared is allowing it to end with dignity, rather than destroying its memory through desperate attempts at resurrection. And the greatest gift you can give your future partner is a heart that has learned to love without clinging, to appreciate without possessing, to commit without attachment. Because the person meant for you will not require you to beg them to stay. They will not need to be convinced of your worth. They will not leave you questioning whether you matter. The right person will see your value immediately and consistently. They will choose you daily rather than abandon you permanently. They will appreciate your love rather than take it for granted. But that person can only find you when you stop hiding in the shadow of someone who already left. They can only love you when you become available to be loved rather than unavailable, due to attachment to unavailability. So practice the ancient art of letting go, not as abandonment of love, but as its highest expression. Not as giving up on connection, but as making space for the right connection. Not as accepting defeat, but as choosing victory over your own suffering. Begin today, wish them well. Release them with love. Thank them for what they taught you. Forgive them for what they couldn't give you. And then turn your attention toward the life that's waiting for you to live it. Because on the other side of letting go lies everything you've been seeking, not in them, but in yourself. And that person, the one who can love without conditions, who can appreciate without possessing, who can let go without regret, that person is more attractive than anyone you've ever been before. If this message resonates with your experience, share it with someone who needs to hear that love sometimes means letting go. Subscribe for more content that teaches you to find freedom through wisdom rather than bondage through attachment. Your peace matters. Your healing matters. Your willingness to love yourself enough to let go matters more than you know.